Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fields of Green for All office here at the Jazz Farm. And today I'm joined by Paul Michael Keichel, who is down in KwaZulu-Natal in his office on his beautiful farm in the Midlands. We felt like we needed to get together today to just offer something by way of explanation of the South African Police Service directive that came in over the weekend. We've been getting endless questions over social media. Lots of people are speculating on what this means and what this doesn't mean. So I just invited Paul Michael to very kindly take some time out of his very busy schedule to just chat through this document with me and hopefully answer some of your questions. So thanks so much, Paul Michael, for joining us today.
Such a pleasure as always, Mert. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, and I might smoke spliffs and drink coffee and whatever in the middle of all of this, because I must say that this directive has changed things, quite a bit for us, considering that it really does come from the top, doesn't it?
It does seem to come from the top. I mean, if you look at the signature at the bottom of it, and certainly it does change things. It does and it doesn't change things, because of course what it's doing is it's stating how the police ought to behave in light of the Constitutional Court judgment that's now 5 years old. Really, this directive could and should have followed sooner. Given the continuing arrests that we've all been shouting so loudly about, but late is better than never, right?
Yeah, it is exactly. And I think that it's just underlining once more that the two previous directives, that if you'd have phoned Fields of Green for All for help, if you were having a little bit of problems with law enforcement, you would have received those two directives in an automatic reply from us. But this one goes just that much further. So if we start at the top, it has the South African Police Services logo at the top. We have the national head of the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation. So that's the Hawks, isn't it?
Yes, that is the Hawks. I don't have the directive in front of me, but I take it you're reading directly. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is addressed to these following people. So head of the Hawks, all divisional commissioners, all regional commissioners, all provincial commissioners, the head of corporate communication, okay, so it's got to go out to everybody, all heads at the head office, it's a very heady thing this, all section heads at the head office, all commanders at the SAPS Academy and the training centers, all deputy national commissioners and the chief of staff at the Minister of Police. So no excuse if you're in the SAPS and you didn't get this directive, because we certainly got it that a lot the last time. Loads of station commanders didn't get it. Yeah,
exactly right. And you might also look. I think it's towards the end. If it's not the concluding paragraph, it's the final the second last paragraph, which talks about how there needs to be kept on file evidence that every single member under the command of a station commander has read and understood this against their signature, which I think is also an incredible step. You know, this is really the SAPS taking proactive action from the top to make sure that this filters down to the to the lowest levels and throughout.
Yep, and no excuses. The last time we got a directive out, we actually sent a whole lot of our supporters and people in the cannabis community to various police stations, and we didn't really have much success except quite a nice campaign on social media. So what I would suggest for those people watching this video is that you take this directive, you print it out, you keep it in your car, you keep it in your bag when you're walking around, you keep it in your house, you know exactly where it is, so you can refer to it at any time. So as they say on the YouTube videos, they say, let's get into the directive. So the subject is arrests by the South African Police Service for cannabis-related matters. Following the 2018 constitutional judgment in the Minister of Justice, Prince, there appears to be confusion as to the legal position in relation to cannabis. In short, possession, use, and cultivation of cannabis by an adult for personal consumption in private is permitted. In contrast, Dealing in cannabis is not permitted, therefore commercialization of cannabis is still not legal in South Africa. Following the order of the Constitutional Court, the definition in Section 1 of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act has been expanded as follows. Deal in relation to a drug includes performing any act in connection with the transshipment, importation, cultivation, other than the cultivation of cannabis by an adult in a private space for his or her personal consumption in private, collection, manufacture, supply, prescription, administration, sale, transmission, or exportation of the drug. So that's not new to us, is it?
No, it's not new to us. The only qualification, I mean, it's a correct statement of what the legal position is, other than, of course, and now the name of the judgment has slipped my lawyer brain, but there was that subsequent judgment where Ronald Lamola, as the Minister of Justice, actually endorsed the relief to say that the protections afforded to adults by Prince 3 also need to be extended to minors. Because you certainly would be ruining a life even more by criminally punishing a minor. So that's really the only qualification to that paragraph.
So that was the Centre for Child Law.
That's quite right.
Yeah, the Centre for Child Law, and it was the 3 unfortunate youngsters who spent 77 days in the a forenamed Bosasa correctional facility just up the road from us in Krugersdorp. And we all know that the Bosasa correctional facilities have been under fire. Angelo Grizzi and all the people, and lots of shenanigans going on there. So don't forget that in terms of children, minors, that is in South Africa, somebody under the age of 18 years old, you cannot be criminalized for cannabis. Following that judgment, which went all the way and was confirmed by the Constitutional Court. So,
but of course, you must not, as an adult, be sharing your cannabis with minors, because that is still criminally prohibited, and probably correctly so.
Yes, minors or a non-consenting adult.
Quite right.
Yeah. So that's why it's really important for example, we'll get into this a bit later, for private clubs to have members so that you don't accidentally have a non-consenting adult in your private space. Yeah. Then this is important to me. Cannabis is still listed as an undesirable dependence-producing substance of Part 3 of the Schedule 2 of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act. Despite this, licenses or permits are, in certain circumstances, granted by SAPRA and the Department of Agriculture, permitting cannabis cultivation for medical research purposes or the cultivation of hemp, which is low THC cannabis, for limited purposes. So this was a big source of discussion at the Pakisa. We call these hemp research permits, we call them the unicorn licenses. And there certainly are all sorts of things like Section 21s and all of that floating around.
No, look, absolutely. If you look at the Meds or the Drugs and Drugs Trafficking Act, there's a general criminal prohibition on dealing in any scheduled or prohibited substance. But then there's an exception created in Section 5 to dealing, which is if you're doing it under license in terms of the Medicines Act. So I don't think it's worth our while going into a deep dive as to what those various licenses and permits look like. But from a very technical perspective, you are permitted to get a license in terms of the Medicines Act that overrides the general criminal prohibition in terms of the Drugs Act.
Yes, and just a word of warning for everybody out there: just be a bit wary of the Section 21 permits. We will be doing a deep dive into. I've just got to pause it. So we had a little interruption there as something just caught fire at the Jazz Farm, but we put the fire out and we're back now. I was speaking about the Section 21 permits. We're not going to go into that now, but Fields of Green is certainly doing lots of investigation into these, and we'll be making some comments at a later stage. Now, the next section in our directive is Section 3. There is currently no legislation that prescribes what quantities of cannabis may be possessed or cultivated in order to comply with the Prince judgment. There's also no legislation that allows for a presumption of dealing where cannabis quantities above a certain threshold is found in the possession of a person. As a result, the amount of cannabis found in possession of a person for private consumption, in private or for cultivation, cannot be used by a member of the SAPS to presume that the person is in fact dealing in cannabis. Wow, that's the first one that blew me sideways. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually it's something that is age old. We're talking about a constitutional court judgment of a few decades old now. That actually
1996.
That the presumption of dealing was unconstitutional. So it's again, it's better late than never. But sometimes, I mean, think about it. You can't expect all SAPS members to be au fait with absolutely every single applicable law. I mean, laws are an incredibly complicated thing. Even us lawyers, we tend to specialize and focus our attention. So it does require directives or national orders such as this to inform members of what they can and can't do or should and shouldn't do.
Exactly. And it's just is one of our bugbears, this whole plant counting issue. But I think that as the post-Phakisa events unfold, somewhat slowly, but there's this word on the wind about another iteration of the bill, about a cannabis steering committee, about all sorts of things moving forward, albeit in a very slow manner. I think that we just have to be super patient with the plant counting thing. I do believe that the plant counting thing will be the reason, if I ever have to go back to Pretoria with all of my 100 cases in the queue with me, it will be something like plant counting, because it's all about harms, and we know that the harms have never been ventilated in court. So that is, they cannot come and say, you only allowed 8 plants, you only allowed 15 plants, and in the last 5 years, this has been an issue for us. No, it's 8 plants. No, it's 15. Well, Paul Michael and I are telling you right now that there is no limit until the regulations have been sorted out. And we hope that there won't be any limit on personal use, private cultivation, but that remains to be seen. And then we go on to number 4, which, since there is no definition or quantification of the concept of personal consumption, the South African Police Services is at risk if they arrest a person for possession, use, or cultivation, and such matter is not enrolled, struck off the roll, or otherwise does not result in prosecution. This exposes the SAPS to civil claims for unlawful arrest and detention. Isn't that a good one?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's always been the sort of protection that civil society has had against rogue members of the South African Police Service, because there are people, or there are members who are completely upstanding and are just trying to do the right thing, and there are those who abuse their powers, sometimes to shake civilians down for bribes, sometimes otherwise just to harass and intimidate. And I think what's nice about this is that it's a caution to those sorts of SAPS members. We would hope in the minority that there will be potential consequences, and even the end of the directive talks about potential internal disciplinary consequences. And we all know that disciplinary inquiries and processes can result in dismissal. So notionally, a SAPS member who blatantly and shamelessly abuses their powers when it comes to cannabis arrest could also face losing their jobs.
Exactly. So, and one of the things that we've always been really, really, really against is people who pay the cops. Okay, there are circumstances where you've got your family at home and it's 9 o'clock on a Friday night or whatever, but there really are very, very few excuses for indulging corrupt cops in bribery and all of that. So we've been very strict about that over the years, and I think that's also going to be something that Fields of Green is going to concentrate on, because we know that the cops are doing their rounds. So right now, if you're watching this video, stop it. Stop paying the cops. stop right now and rather phone us, because we have all sorts of resources that we can use. So don't be a wuss and, grow some balls, have some courage, and just say no. That brown paper packet has to end. It really does. And you know who you are, who's paying the cops. I know who you are too. I'm so tired of saying the same thing over and over again.
Mother Green is watching.
Yeah. And then we go on to number 5. Whenever a member has suspicion of or reasonable grounds in relation to an offense involving cannabis, the suspect, like any other suspect, must be treated with dignity and in compliance of the prescripts laid down by the law, including the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, all lawful means of securing the accused's attendance in trial. So in other words, they're going to give you a piece of paper to say that you've got to be in court, such as a summons or written notice, need to be considered before resorting to arrest and detention. This was just something that I asked for over and over and over again at the Pakisa, is just stop locking us up in cages. So make sure that you've got a relevant proof of address, okay? And your car licenses are up to date and your IDs are all up to date and everything like that. And if you've got a proof of address, that should be good enough to say, okay, you're going to be in court on Monday. For purposes of a summons or written notice, the name, residential address, occupation, and status for the accused must be obtained to ensure his or her appearance at an identified court on a specific court date. A criminal case docket must be registered, and the cannabis or any other exhibits must be seized and booked. Now, don't we know that it goes out the back door and straight back into the streets in this like circular economy? And I must say that line that says before resorting to arrest and detention is underlined in the document. So that's really it's very much a civil society issue, and this stop locking us up in cages thing should, but it's still got to be proved, should end, given number 5. Then 5.1 says, before arresting alleged cannabis offenders and the seizure of their property proceed, members of the SAPS should liaise with the prosecuting authority, where possible, to determine whether the matter will be enrolled and prosecuted. It is also advisable to obtain a search and seizure warrant beforehand, before such operations are conducted. This will ensure that the process is subject to judicial oversight and the rule of the law. So that's quite obvious that before they seize your stuff, they must go to the NPA, they must go to the magistrates. So I'm hoping that this 5.1 paragraph puts an end to them arriving at 2:00 in the morning on a Thursday. That's what they did to Jules and I,
Well, that's point. Sorry, it's a very important point, because when it comes to criminal justice, the SAPS and the NPA are conjoined twins. If the NPA communicates very effectively with the SAPS that they don't anymore foresee, or they don't, they're not creating a demand for cannabis arrests and prosecutions, well, then what demand would SAPS be supplying? So one would hope that we generate some sort of feedback loop through this, where cannabis arrests, or at least petty cannabis arrests for personal and private use and possession, become a thing of the past. And if there are going to be continued arrests, it's only for the real big dealing operations.
Yeah. Exactly. So this 2:00 in the morning, unless they've got it really, really all set up before with the local magistrates and everything, we hope that we're going to see an end to that. And also, we have had so many arrests that have arrived, been locked in a cage over the weekend or for a few days, or with quite a few people recently, between 5, 7, 14 days in an actual jail with the waiting trial prisoners. People are transferred from the police holding cells to Kloof or to Pollsmoor or to one of the big prisons. And this is when the real harm occurs. And then only to be released, taken to the magistrate on Monday morning to have the case struck off the roll, withdrawn, all sorts of different things. So hopefully we're going to see an end to this, and we hope that the NPA can actually stand up to this and start speaking to the police, because we know that we're not going to get a directive from the NPA stopping the prosecutions. That we know. The Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act has to be changed first, and that will stop the prosecutions. Okay.
Well, it's not really for the MPA to issue a directive stopping prosecution. Something either is or isn't a crime, and if it is a crime, the NPA needs to try to prosecute it. So I think what's more important here is a directive to the SAPs to say stop arresting for this, because it isn't a crime and it ought never to be prosecuted.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Turn that around. Yeah. And then number 6, and I really like section 6, and it's our third to last section. Section 6: no arrests are to be made for personal and private cultivation and or possession of cannabis, which activities are not criminal. Not great English. Furthermore, no arrests of alleged cannabis offenders should be effected merely for the reason to achieve predetermined targets and without assurance that there is indeed a crime that will be enrolled and prosecuted by the National Prosecuting Authority.
There goes the low-hanging fruits to meet arrest quotas.
Exactly. Quotas. Wow, that's a thing that we spoke about quite extensively at Drug Policy Week, because everybody across drug policy circles deals with these quota issues. So quotas are down the toilet, ladies and gentlemen. There it is in paragraph 5.1. I'll never forget reading in an amazing book called The Street, which was about Ontdekker's Road here in Johannesburg, which is one of the longest roads stretching from east to west in Joburg. And the book was all set in Ontdekker's Road, and there were quotas for knife crime. And it was a non-fiction book, and there was a policeman who was speaking to the author, and he said, we just used to go to the Checkers on a Friday and buy some knives, you know. So the quotas thing it's dodgy all around the world. It's dodgy as a concept. I know that Simon Howell, our criminology expert, will tell you how problematic it is academically and legally. So quotas for cannabis should be down the toilet very soon. Paragraph 6.1, a private space is any space that the public does not have access to as a matter of right. So what private spaces do public have to as a matter of right?
Well, a public park or a shopping mall. I mean, I suppose perhaps not a shopping mall, because there they put on that sign, right of admission reserved. But a public park, or a public road, or anything that we understand you've got access to. If you're a member of the South African citizenry, you can access that. But for example, private residences, or even any sort of private residence, even if it's a business premises, so long as right of admission is reserved by the owner of that premises or the person who controls that premises, that's a private space, it's a public space. So if you can't just walk in and assert your right to be there, then you're talking about a private space.
Okay, great, because the two things that are noteworthy here are parks and beaches. Yeah. So please, you can't say, oh, we were just sitting smoking on the beach. No. Really? No, we're just sitting in the park smoking. We're just walking down the street. So if there's no access control, as it were, there's no access control, then just don't walk down the street smoking a spliff. Don't smoke a spliff on the beach. It doesn't matter if there's a beautiful sunset or whatever. The beach is a public space. Thank goodness. Because if our beaches had been privatized, we wouldn't have any beaches, us poor people. So don't smoke on the beach, don't smoke in parks, don't smoke walking down the road. Okay. Next one, a physical barrier preventing access is not a requirement of a private space. Now that one I wasn't so sure about. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, take our compatriots who live in townships, etc. I mean, are they not allowed to grow cannabis in their gardens just because they can't afford a fence or a garden gate? So I think that's quite choice wording to cater to that sort of eventuality, so that our friends in the townships who want to grow cannabis can conceivably do so without being harassed by the police.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for that clarification. A person does not need to be the owner of a space for it to be a private space. Okay, so if you are renting in a complex, yeah, we've dealt with loads of those, and our lawyer Craig Harvey, thank goodness, has really sorted all of. He's got representations for all of these situations that people in complexes find themselves. So, but if you are living in a complex, you've got to be really careful to read your terms of engagement with that lease contract. If yours is a non-smoking apartment or duplex or whatever, it's non-smoking. Buy a vape pen, buy a Puffco, have something, a non-stinky device, really. So that's 6.1.2, 6.1.3. Cannabis is privately possessed if hidden from view when carried in public. The inside of a motor vehicle is a private space. I love that one. Your bag is a private space. Your car is a private space. So no, officer, you cannot search my car for dacha. Finished. Carry this in your car. Print it out.
Well, of course, the qualification, sorry, Mertz, is that, of course, it remains a crime in terms of the national road traffic legislation to drive under the influence of narcotics. So you certainly can't pull over on the side of the road, fill your car with smoke, and expect a passing JMPD officer to do nothing about it.
Yes, and I mean, there's no accounting for stupid sometimes. But if you're in your low-slung Golf and you're oofing along and there's billows of bong smoke coming out of there, and you're driving down Malibongwe on a Friday afternoon, you're going to be pulled over and there's going to be trouble. So just, you don't have to display your consumption of cannabis for everybody to see. So the motor vehicle is a private space and your bag is a private space. 6.1.4, cannabis dispensed by a traditional, cultural, or religious healer in small quantities is privately and personally possessed. So, I mean, that is a traditional healer, cultural leader, a Rastafari church. What do you think they mean by small quantities, and what do you think that scenario, how do you think it's going to play out?
Look, I'm always reluctant when you use a word like small quantities because it's undefined, and there's always a risk or an anxiety when you're leaving this within the discretion of the arresting officer. But the way that I read that is, you listed some examples there about the Rasta churches and, sort of other community or traditional organizations. I think pretty much so long as we're not abusing these things as fronts to enable large-scale dealing of cannabis, I think that's a nudge to the SAPs to just leave those people alone.
I think so too, and particularly seeing as the traditional healers and the Rastafari community have been particularly targeted, simply just because of their appearance, because of their dreadlocks, because of their clothes. Gogos and gomas in their robes. I will never forget when Joanne, Craig Harvey, and myself went up to Bushback Ridge, and we got the gogo out of jail and we got her charges squashed. And they carried Craig out of the court on their heads like this, singing and celebrating, because it really was an unlawful arrest of an elderly lady. And I think that this is some human rights abuses of our Constitution, abuses of our Bill of Rights that are targeted at marginalized communities. Indigenous people and our local communities have had enough with this. So when it comes to other people in the commercial sector and people using traditional healers as fronts for for their operations, for their pot shops. I'm just warning everybody out there that this is in my opinion, the highest lack of integrity that you could possibly have, because it flies in the face of our traditions, of our cultures, of our traditional medicines that we are fighting so hard to preserve around the world. You know, we're not alone in the traditional use of cannabis. It's traditionally used all over the world, and where cannabis comes from originally, up in Nepal and Afghanistan and places like that, we stand in solidarity with all of those people. And if you are going to put a sangoma as a front to say that what you are doing is legal, shame on you. Shame on you, because we have this directive now, and at Fields of Green for All, we are working very, very hard for everybody from every walk of life to have equal access. Because if it's not legal for the Sneeman, the guy with the matchbox on the corner, who we haven't sorted out his fate yet, it's not legal for everybody in this country to have some sort of participation in the cannabis community, then it's not legal for you and your fake sangoma either. So yeah, we all remember the Canapax debacle from a few years ago with all the fake sangomas in all the pot shops. So from Fields of Green for All, stop using sangomas as a front. Stop having fake patients on any level. We don't have to be sick to be able to use cannabis. So stop having a backache and going off and getting a Section 21 or however you're going to get around it. You don't have to. If you're sick, go to a proper doctor and they can prescribe some sort of prescription cannabis medicine for you. But if you're not sick, the country is full of dacha private clubs. So I just had a little aside rant there. Sorry. I'm sick of fake sangomas. Really, I've got too many traditional healers who are very, very dear to me and have gone through incredible training and incredible hardship and a calling that is their spiritual right to practice as traditional healers. Fake sangomas are my worst. Anyway, 6.1.5. This, more than one person may have ownership rights to personal and private cannabis. Yep. What's your comment on that?
Look, it's an age-old legal concept, joint co-ownership of something. You know, you're allowed to jointly co-own a house or any other property for that matter. You know, it's not to say that each item, however you define an item, has to be owned by a singular person. And obviously, once personal and private cannabis became legal or at least decriminalized, that then becomes private property. And who's to say then that more than one person couldn't have ownership rights over cannabis? I mean, you take the classic example, I always go back to it, but a dig's full of students who rent their house and grow a bunch of weed that they all collectively cure and smoke together. There ought to be no problem with that.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that this also bodes well for private clubs, but also a word of caution, because we can't just do anything that we want. So Fields of Green for All is developing a code of conduct for clubs that's got nothing to do with how you run your business. Fields of Green for All doesn't care how you run your business, but we do care about integrity and ethics, and always best practice when it comes to maintaining privacy. And certainly between Cullinan's, Paul Michael's law firm, myself, Neil Little down in Cape Town, the Hayes Club case has not gone away. We're busy re-strategizing, aren't we, PM? And our heads of argument are in with the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein as amicus, friends of the court, for the Hayes Club case. And I feel that we need to see the Hayes Club case through to its logical constitutional court, declaratory order or whatever we're going to get. I feel that it would be a logical conclusion, don't you?
Yeah, look, I do, but you know, also I'm very much a practical guy and a means to an end. You know, I also don't see why, with the shift in the winds of late, you know, the Pakisa statement that was issued by the presidency read alongside this sort of document that we're discussing today. I really don't understand why the state's still fighting us. They could also just capitulate.
They could. And I mean, in some way, that this is such a roller coaster, because we've also got the trial of the plant, But I've decided that I am just going to rest on a day-to-day basis, because I have this ridiculous utopian idea that everything is going to wrap itself up really smoothly in a little package, which I know is unrealistic. But for everybody out there, the legal stuff is complicated. We've still got the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act. So follow Fields of Green for All, support us, and we will try and support all South Africans in getting this as neatly packaged as we can. Then that to me, after the more than one person can have ownership rights to personal and private cannabis, brings us to number 7, which is the circular must be brought to attention of all the members under your command against their signature and filed as proof, as we said earlier, that such members familiarize themselves with the content of the circular. Any inquiries in relation to the circular should be directed to blah, blah, blah. You can download this directive from Fields of Green for All's social media. We've published it there. It's all over the place. We'll also publish the full PDF in a blog in the next day or two. And I think that it's signed off by Brigadier N.F. van Graan, who is with us at the Pakisa. And that concludes number 7. And number 8 is failure of a member to comply with these instructions may result in disciplinary steps. Full stop. I like that.
Look, what's nice about this directive, especially relative to those previous ones that we've seen, is it's shortened to the point. It's unambiguous. Do this, don't do that.
Yep, I would totally agree with you. And it is signed by the National Commissioner, South African Police Service, General Masimola. So thank you, General Masimola, for this. And thank you, Paul Michael, for joining me this afternoon. And for everybody who's watched this video, if you've got any questions, please get a hold of us. You know how you can contact us, either on our website, our helpline, which is manned 24 hours a day, or on social media. So until the next time we chat PM, thanks so much, and we hope we've got some clarity.